So I was over the weekend. I was trying to find some things last night after all the wedding festivities. I was looking for things to watch, and at first I was looking forward to my The Last of Us, which is this show that is very popular.
People love it.
It's become one of those it shows right now. It's based on a video game, which I may or may not have played to completion years ago, all the way through. But it's based on a video game, and it's become a very popular show. But it's one of those video games that they spent, I don't even know how much. I think it sold almost $1 billion worth of product around the world. It was an enormously successful.
But you would recommend this show. Like, it is like, people seem to love it.
I like it. Look, I'll say this. If you like The Walking Dead, which is a lot of our people, a lot of our audience, which I also liked, I fell off. It got a little too violent and nihilistic for me toward the end. Toward the everyone knows what I'm talking about. The guy with the bat, Negan, I think is his name, the whole thing. But anyway, if you like The Walking Dead, you'll like this show. So I'm watching it. I'm trying to watch The Last of Us. It's fascinating because the most recent episode I didn't get through all of last night's, the newest one, but the week before, the entire episode was devoted to a gay love story. It was about two guys who are surviving the apocalypse together. And, Jeff Bezos tweeted about it, everything else, and people were, it was very
Elon
beautiful.
Musk loves it. I mean, it's bringing a lot of people this thing's awesome.
Right. What I thought was interesting, though, is that the New York Times response to this a few days ago was, in the opinion section, one of their authors wrote, "The Last of Us is a very conservative show." To which I'm like, so the show that just had an entire hour, and by the way, none of the rest of the show is like about some romantic love story. It's about fungus zombies eating people's faces. I mean, it's pretty silly stuff. The whole show is about Nick Offerman, who played famously and incredibly, to my mind, I think he was amazing as Ron Swanson in the show Parks and Recreation, which I can also recommend. But skip to season 2. Just skip season 1 altogether if you haven't seen it. Nick Offerman plays this guy. Anyway. They say it's very conservative because it's about guns and surviving the apocalypse and the pandemic authorities. And it's like, okay, they just did a whole episode about, two gay guys in love. And we're being told that this is the most conservative show imaginable, whatever. You're just getting used to, you're getting used to all this content having to be woke in some way all the time. And I wouldn't even argue necessarily that this, because it does actually come from the video game. I'm not even saying that the gay love story is necessarily woke, but you just expect the wokeness to be judged in everything. You can't escape it, right? You can't make a show without the columnists weighing in and saying, oh, but is this woke enough or not so woke or whatever? Everything is seen through the political lens. And so I was looking for something else, and sure enough, I see an advertisement on Hulu, Clay, for the 1619 Project show, which is out there now. So I thought this would be an interesting opportunity for us. First of all, we have a short clip from the trailer for the 1619 Project TV show, and here's just a sampling of it.
The truth is, Black Americans have always been foundational to the idea of American freedom.
Democracy is a fight. It will always be a fight.
You are calling for reparations. What is the total that would be owed?
$14 trillion.
That's a big number.
Yeah.
Big debt, though.
It is a big debt.
There's a guy calling for reparations there. Says, 13 trillion. 13 trillion with a T. Should cover. This isn't the trailer for the series. It's remarkable when you see. So I've read the 1619 Project essays. I have not seen the series, to be fair. But, Clay, a lot of people have come in with, including from the left, what would be considered left or liberal academics, historians, have said that there's a lot of problems with the way the 1619 Project is presented. I mean, the biggest one that I always think of is the notion that the American Revolution was fought as a defense of slavery. Historians have not the Civil War about slavery, the American Revolution against the British was to create a, quote, slaveocracy, which is in the founding essay of the 1619 Project as a central concept, and it is just historically ignorant. It is not true that is actually what was happening.
Yeah, and that's what frustrates me the most about it. And this has gotten its tendrils into the larger historiography, which I had never even heard that word until I was a history major in college. And historiography is basically the study of how we study history, as opposed to just history itself and what stories are told and which stories we choose to focus on and all of those aspects of history. And the Babylon Bee actually had a great story that said, and I'm paraphrasing here, and Babylon Bee certainly is like a conservative version of The Onion, our friend Seth Dillon, who's a really smart, funny guy. But it essentially said, reparations are owed to every person who's ever lived because everyone's ancestors were slaves at some time. And this is the essence of why the 1619 Project is fundamentally flawed, because it focuses only, Buck, on the 80 years that slavery was legal in the United States as an independent nation, 1783 to 1863, as if it is the fundamental guiding tenet of America itself. And obviously 1619 refers to the first year that enslaved Africans arrived in the United States. But it is such a myopic version of United States history that is trying to destroy the idea of America as a fundamentally good country. That's the essence of it.
I mean, when you read through the 1619 Project, and I'm trying to convince, do I want to spend the time, the hours to watch the show, to do a critique of it? That's reading, fine. I'll read anything to critique it. Watching, because I also feel like I'm supporting, I'm another, and it's true of reading as well, I get, but I can't really get my head around, I'm going to watch something that I'm just doing it to be able to critique it, because I know I'm not going to agree, because I've read the essay. It's not like I'm taking a shot in the dark here out of nowhere. I've read the essays, and I can say this. I mean, one thing that's entirely missing from the 1619 Project, and the reason this matters so much, is that everyone needs to remember this is being used as essentially a program of historical indoctrination in schools now. So children are being taught the 1619 Project as history. And there are enormous problems and shortcomings with it as history, even apart from the obvious politicization. And, you go from slavery, horrible, really bad, totally true, to all of a sudden it fast forwards to the BLM movement. And you go, wait, well, and they're creating present. Yeah. No, that they really.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's the goal.
It goes through the history, you're talking about, in one essay, it'll be describing what's going on in, the 1770s. And then all of a sudden it's, there's photos of people doing, BLM stuff. And you're saying, wait a second, BLM protests. And so it's explicitly political, but they leave out things like slavery had existed, as we know, for thousands of years all over the world, that it was a constant in the human condition, that whether it's ancient Rome or the Jews in Egypt or white Christians being grabbed by Muslim corsairs or the Barbary pirates, and that occurred all over the coast of Europe. For hundreds of years find me a society historically that had power, and I'll find you a society essentially that had slaves. That was the truism of human history. And the first time that there was a recognition of this as morally wrong, not a question of we don't have the power to do this or it's not in our interest right now, but this is morally wrong. And the birthplace of a real abolition movement was within the United States. This is entirely left out of the context of the 1619 Project. It's fascinating to see how the 1619 Project jumps around from the British are kind of the good guys in this because they abolished slavery before the United States does. But it's more complicated than that. First of all, they didn't abolish slavery in their possessions in the Caribbean until I think it was the 1830s. They also, they talk about the transatlantic slave trade, and this is all supposed to be visited upon America, Brazil, South America, Central America, the Caribbean. There was slave importation going on to every country to our south. That was a reality as well. The first slaves were brought here, as we know, they were taken from Portuguese slave traders in West Africa and then given to English pirates, who then sold them to colonists here in America. But there are substantial historical shortcomings. The British, not only did they not abolish slavery in their Caribbean colonies till the 1830s, Clay, they were going to support the Confederacy during the Civil War. So the British are the good guys during the Revolution because they were the ones trying to end slavery. But then the British are going to fight with the Confederacy they didn't, but they were supporting the Confederacy to preserve slavery. So it's just there's a total lack of honesty in the project that comes across in very important ways.
Yeah, and anytime you focus exclusively on one part of the story, I mean, we talked about this recently, but there's very little attention paid to, the 600,000 white people who died in the Civil War, right? Almost everyone, at least if you had people who were in the United States in the 1860s, ancestors, you would have had either Northern or Southern soldiers who died in your past. I mean, I used as an example, I certainly did, because some of my ancestors are from the South, but a lot of them are from Kentucky. And Kentucky obviously was a border state where some people fought on both sides. One of my ancestors died fighting hand-to-hand combat with Nathan Bedford Forrest as a Union cavalry soldier. Now, I also had Southern Confederate background. But how do you balance out that? Like, literally having someone who is one of your ancestors dying in a civil war on the side of the North kind of seems like a significant factor in how much responsibility you're going to be assessed, right? And the big issue here is none of us did anything wrong, right? Like, none of us have done.
This also was in the past,
culpable. Yes,
holding people responsible today for what people did who have been long since dead, I think is obviously immoral. But that's part of the whole project here, is to make this the problem of everybody living today and to demand $13 trillion of reparations. I mean, I could sit here, we could do, maybe we should at some point, just a whole breaking down the areas where there's just an intentional editorial decision made to omit things that are not, and this is being taught to your kids, everybody, so this matters. They're using this in schools. When they say that the revolution was fought to defend slavery, which is the explicit contention in the foundational essay by Nicole Hannah Jones of the 1619 Project, there is no mention of the fact that about 10% of those who fought against the British on the side of the colonists of the Revolution were black.
Yeah. It's kind of
Many
significant.
of them were joining up to fight alongside the rest of the colonists. No discussion. There is mention of Crispus Attucks, who was the first person, they say, who died in the Revolutionary. It was actually, I believe, at the Boston Massacre. Yeah. But there were freedmen who signed up to fight alongside the Americans. I mean, at the time, the colonists, a substantial number of them in the Revolution, which was something that you would think that there would have to be some dealing with this, and just also the fundamental premise that the Constitution and the founding was a lie when it was written, which is something that's repeated frequently in the 1619 Project. When Frederick Douglass said, "No, it was genius, it was brilliance. We just had to fight to make it so." The decision not to throw out the founding as something that was a lie, but to understand the founding as something that was remarkable in human history as setting in motion the greatest country that ever lived. So anyway, our democracy's ideals were false when they were written. That is the line from the 1619 Project, and I just think that's troublesome for people to get a very one-sided view of American history. There are a lot of troubling facts in the 1619 Project that people should know. There's a lot of history that is good and people do need to understand, but there are a lot of things, Clay, that are as you brought up. Civil War was 500,000, 600,000 people died in the Civil War to end the institution of slavery. That would seem to be something that might want to work more into the analysis here of exactly who was willing to do what to end this institution.